We thank you for joining us this morning. If you are just tuning in to Fox 40 News this morning, of course, you're not used to seeing us this bright and early, but we do have some breaking news about that earthquake that happened in Northern California this morning.
In Northern California, in the Vallejo area, it hit just about 320, and it was a magnitude 6.0. And the interesting thing here is it wasn't just one earthquake, it was actually two. The second we would not have felt. It was about 300 miles south, but they happened exactly 1 minute apart. The one in Vallejo hit at about 320. The second one hit at about 321.
And we know this is the biggest earthquake in like 25 years. We know there's moderate damage to homes and businesses. Of course, power outages that we have been reporting to you this morning, and some reports of minor injuries and some reports of some pretty serious injuries as well out of Napa. And of course, we'll update you a little bit more on those. But what we were told by Barry Martin this morning with the city of Napa, he says the local hospital is treating 87 people. 3 are in critical condition, 2 adults, 1 child flown to Santa Rosa Hospital with some serious injuries there as well.
Yeah, and a lot of questions when anything like this happens, talking about water mains and gas lines and things like that. So he was able to give us an update. And this, mind you, this update is only out of the Napa area. The hardest hit areas obviously were Napa, but also into the Bay Area some, and people could feel it all the way up to Pollock Pines. So there's sort of damage all the way up and down that area. But we do know just in the Napa area, they have reports of 30 water line breaks that, of course, city crews are on immediately. Also, couldn't give me an exact number, but he said dozens of gas line problems as well. But again, that's not the city's issue, that is PG&E's issue, and say they are looking into all of those. But we've got crews out all over the place. Let's get right to Ben Deasy, who is live with us now in Napa. And Ben, from what we understand, you were on the corner of Brown and 2nd Street, and take a look at what is behind you there. Give us a description of that.
Yeah, Brown and 2nd in downtown Napa, Eric, and it's not just the water lines, the gas lines that are broken, that are a hazard. It's buildings, too. Take a look right behind me. You can see some of these old historic structures in downtown Napa have been compromised, not structurally sound. You can see that the front-facing corner of that entire building has completely fallen down during this earthquake. The rubble on the sidewalk just covering the sidewalk, destruction pretty widespread. And it's not just that building, it is all down 2nd Street, Brown Street here in downtown Napa. A lot of cracks in these buildings, a lot of places where bricks could still fall down. That's why this area is roped off. There are a lot of curious people, a lot of onlookers that have come to check things out. But again, because these buildings not structurally sound at this point, the area is roped off, and we have Napa County Sheriff on hand trying to prevent those curious people from getting too close, because again, those bricks, those building pieces could still fall on the sidewalk and cause problems. And not just that side of the street either. The Hall of Justice here in Napa also suffering major damage. We're going to show you a peek of it through these tree branches here. You can see the entire corner of that building also crumbled during this earthquake. Widespread damage here in downtown Napa. They haven't yet been inside to evaluate the structural integrity of these buildings. Professionals haven't yet taken a look, so right now everything blocked off. They're trying to keep folks out because they just don't know if more rubble is going to come down as a result of this quake.
Ben, we're hearing helicopters over your head, obviously some news choppers getting as much information and video as they can.
Yep.
But when you got there and there's sort of people looking around, people wondering what's going on, how informed are people as to what happened and when it happened? Or do they just seem like they sort of woke up this morning and thought, I'm going to go downtown and figure things out? Do they know what happened and what time it happened at?
Well, yeah, keep in mind, Eric, most of the people who are down here at this point have lived through this. They were awoken this morning by the intense shaking. Really, the only folks down here who don't have firsthand knowledge necessarily are those helicopters and those news crews who've come to the scene, and there are a lot of them. But folks really want to get a sense for something that they've lived through to see exactly how extensive the damage is. And, this is a good indication of exactly what they did live. They've come down to sort of just put it in perspective. At 3:20 this morning, those who were woken up out of a sleep by the intense shaking, the long intense shaking, have come down to now take a look at some of the damage that's done. It's not just this building over here. We're going to swing you over to the Wells Fargo building, and you can see the corner of that building. Also a lot of brick come down onto the sidewalk as a result of this earthquake. So it's pretty widespread through this downtown area. Now, we've been told that a number of these buildings were retrofitted in order to withstand an earthquake. Obviously, that retrofitting not completely effective here this morning.
All right, Ben DC, we thank you so much for that report. And that building that Ben DC was in front of, that is the Napa Wine Collective, a.k.a. the Sam Key Laundry Building and Plaza Hotel that we heard Barry Martin with the city of Napa talk about a little bit earlier in the newscast. And you see pretty severe damage out there. Also damage at a mobile home park in Napa right now. And that is where Rowena Shaddix is live. And Rowena, what's the very latest out there?
Well, Tia, the firefighters are in mop-up mode right now, putting a lot of foam on this one particular mobile home that was destroyed by the fire, making sure there are no flare-ups. The roof is totally removed by firefighters, and again, they are spraying this with a lot of foam just to make sure that there are no additional problems. The biggest problem that firefighters did have to face, we talked about this earlier, the main water line broke, and so the water had to be shipped in on tankers, and that, of course, it caused a delay. But also, firefighters are crediting mutual aid for helping them keep the fire to just the 4 mobile homes that were destroyed. Now, one of the other mobile homes that was completely destroyed is just about a block away. We did catch up with her, Lorraine Bilby, and this is what she had to say.
They were screaming at me to get out because the gas main went up. And so I ran back in and got my dog and my cell phone charger, and my purse.
And you.
And me.
Sad.
Well, Mike is the other homeowner that you are taking a look at. He was just overcome, too devastated to even talk. He came back from Suisun City to his mobile home that he's lived in for 12 years. Very emotional for him. No fire damage, but it is completely off of its foundation. And we're seeing a lot more homes like that here in this mobile home park. No fire damage, but totally destroyed off its foundation.
Ro, let me ask you something before we let you go. We did hear from Barry Martin with the city of Napa, who talked a lot about first responders. It looks like there are a lot of them behind you, and it looks like they were prepared for something like this.
Definitely that was the case, Tia. There's a fire truck that's directly behind Dan Slack. That's why it's pretty noisy. And this, aside from the live trucks, firefighters all over this area on different blocks where the homes were affected. They handled this quite well, considering that the main water line broke. There was no fire, there was no water to get the initial flames out, but they were able to ship in water on tankers and douse the fire that way. Now, toward the end, the fire captain told us that they also were coming low on water, but fortunately it was after all the big flames were extinguished. They needed the water basically just to in the mop-up mode, making sure that it didn't spread to any other mobile homes. But definitely they are on the ball, and they credit a lot of mutual aid to Napa County.
All right, and Ro, just one last real quick question here for you. Everybody that we have talked to so far, there is always a very direct comparison to what happened in 1989 with that earthquake, and it scared so many people. I mean, part of the bridge collapsed, you know? So when something like that happens, I think it just, the amount of fear that's in people's minds when they start to feel that shaking. Now, these people that were impacted here at the mobile home park, was that something that they brought up to you, that they wondered whether or not this was going to be the next Loma Prieta with that kind of damage?
Definitely there was some reference to that, Eric, but more recently to the one that affected them in the early 2000s, where there were some homes that were greatly affected. Some people lost their chimneys to that one. They said the comparison for that one was devastating. It was also pretty much a violent jolt is what they felt just before everything broke loose. And some of the homeowners here, mostly they are retired folks. This is a retirement community. They said the exact same thing. They were woken out of their sleep, very violent, kind of shaking to their homes. And a lot of it brought back memories to the one here that devastated a lot of parts of Napa in the early 2000s.
All right, Rowena, we thank you so much for that report. And Rowena just talked about this, you know, the biggest quake to hit the Bay Area since 1989. That was the Loma Prieta earthquake that happened. It was magnitude 6.9. It struck minutes after 5 p.m. just before the third game of the World Series at Candlestick Park. We do know that 62 people died in the Bay Area. Nearly 4,000 were injured, and part of the Bay Bridge did collapse. So did the upper deck of the Cypress Viaduct on 880.
Yeah, and I think a lot of folks, maybe your viewers that are watching right now, first of all, we appreciate it, but maybe you remember Jim Crandall was covering the World Series that day, and he was at the stadium when all of that happened and ended up staying there, well, for a multitude of reasons, but for the biggest reason, he couldn't get out. And he
Wow.
ended up there in the Bay Area from the stadium reporting for about 3 days because he couldn't get out of the Bay Area.
Right.
And, you know, it really brought us some incredible live pictures, giving us a really good indication of what a 6.9 could do in the Bay Area.
And that's the situation here. I mean, many of us haven't had much sleep. Dennis Shanahan is in the Weather Center. He's a prime example. How much sleep did you get, Dennis? Because I know you felt this at your home as well.
Yeah, about an hour. Slept about an hour, but you run on adrenaline on days like this. You know, I felt this quake. I also felt that Loma Prieta quake, and I was driving at the time, and it's a strange phenomenon. When you are driving, you think all your tires are slashed when you're in a sizable quake. Let's talk a little bit more about this quake, what kind of quake this was. It happened along a series of faults related to the Hayward fault system, the scientists are telling us, and it was at a depth of about 6.7 miles under the wine country. Now, some scientists speculate it is related to the Franklin Fault. Now, that is a crack that was thought to be dormant for 1.6 million years, so that would definitely be significant if that turns out to be true. This is a strike slip fault. This is where portions of the Earth crust move sideways in relation to one another. And this area in Napa where the strike happened, this was a 22-mile-long series of faults in the Napa Valley. So they kind of weave together almost like a puzzle, and they move sideways north to northwest. So the energy builds up in the earth and then it snaps. You think of like a rubber band just kind of snapping, and that's when you do have a quake, this energy obviously building up for quite some time along a quake, a fault that, if the scientists are right about this speculation, could have been dormant for 1.6 million years. Just think about that, guys. That is very, very significant.
That's a long period of time, and we know we've seen a lot of significant damage as a result of this. A lot of that damage happening in Napa Valley. You're looking at some of the damage right now done in a store, this store in Napa Valley. You know, the place just looks like it's ransacked.
Yeah, well, a lot of people that we've talked to just described it as a big jolt, not necessarily as sort of a waving motion.
Right.
And that's the way a lot of people described some earthquakes that have happened in the past, including Loma Prieta. Dennis, I was in that one as well, and it was very much a waving type motion as opposed to this, which is being described as a jolt. We've got Leo Grover on the phone. Leo, thanks for being with us this morning. And from what I understand, the producers were talking to you earlier, and they said that part of what you do is to respond to natural disasters like this. Have you responded to an earthquake of this size prior?
Yes, I've worked the North Ridge earthquake in the past, and earthquake up in Seattle, outside of Olympia, just up in Washington years ago, and then numerous tornadoes and hurricanes throughout the states. So thank you very much for having me on. I think it's very good for people to know some situations when it comes to dealing with your insurance companies and how to handle your personal property, and for commercial businesses to understand how to handle their product and recovering some of their damaged goods.
Well, Leo, since you mentioned that, you know, damages, we have seen significant damage to a lot of homes on our air this morning. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, what is the process? What do you do when someone calls you up and say, hey, there is damage to my home? What's the process?
Well, typically we work with some municipalities, a lot of insurance companies, large commercial property management companies, real estate companies. So when it comes to responding from our standpoint, meaning my industry has a lot of companies that do respond to sudden and accidental disasters, and we specialize in capturing all the resulting damage from the disaster. So from this, there's going to be significant damage. I mean, you can see the roads are buckled, and all that is going to be our local and state authorities are going to be handling that. But when it comes to residents and commercial, we try to capture with them and help them understand all the resulting damage of what happened to their structure, to their business, to their industry, and assist them in getting them back to some form of normalcy or getting them back generating revenue as fast as possible.
Let me ask you this really quickly. We've heard from a lot of people this morning, and I've asked a lot of people that we've talked to, hey, did you get a chance to go out and look around your property? Did you see any damage? What do you suggest? Some people say maybe they don't see anything right now. Maybe there's something deeper that they may not see, you know, just walking around their property. What do you suggest for that type of surveying?
Well, first of all, if they do suspect or if they do see stress fractures within their homes and businesses, I mean, you must look up, okay? So things do fall down. Those old brick chimneys that are all throughout Napa and Sonoma, those are the first things that kind of collapse, and the spraying out of glass. And please remember that there is going to be a lot of aftershocks. So maybe some things haven't actually popped yet, but they're very weak. So another maybe 2.5 earthquake is going to make a chimney come down. So, you know, I'd take some time and let all the aftershocks, well, not all of them, but, you know, just take your time. If you smell something, if you smell gas, get away and let the authorities know. You know, if you know where your turnoff valve is, that's great. But if you don't and you're smelling it, get a state, local authority, let them know, and they will respond immediately. We're already seeing fires, and those are because, I'm guarantee it's because gas lines have ruptured and there was a pilot light nearby that was on and it caused the fire. So those little tiny pilot light flames within the water heaters or within gas stoves, and if there's gas creeping, it's a perfect scenario for a fire. So if you smell gas, get somebody that in an authoritative state, whether the state, local police, get them to inspect immediately and stay away.
All right, Leo, let me ask you this. I got a message from somebody on Twitter this morning. They said they had a swimming pool in the backyard and they think it might be cracked. They think the foundation might be cracked, but they're not sure. If those words are coming out of somebody's mouth, or written words anyway, I mean, the first thing that they should do is to call their insurance representative. Is that correct? I mean, just to absolutely make sure, because if they don't get this turned in immediately, then it's going to turn into something that maybe the insurance company believes happened before the earthquake, and they're blaming it on that. I mean, the important thing is the speed of reporting this. Is that right?
Absolutely. There is definitely speed, and trust me, every insurance company that has a client within that area already has on their radar screen who is insured, from everybody from Liberty to State Farm.
Right.
They already know. They've already probably have a CAT team. A CAT team is short for catastrophe team, already in place. And everybody's already been notified. They know how many insureds they have. And, you know, insurance companies are there to respond, and they're there to make sure that their client is made whole. And so there's a lot of negative things that have been said by insurance companies, but honestly, they're there to make sure that you are put back the way you were prior to the disaster. Now, earthquake insurance, a lot of times people just don't have earthquake insurance because it's so expensive. So that's where you're going to be going to Small Business Administration for businesses, and you're going to be reaching out, taking a look at other avenues to get your residences put back together if you don't have residential insurance.
Okay, and Leo, if they do have insurance, where can you expect in terms of when they deem that something was wrong with your piece of property and then the money to come in? Is there a long lag time between that? Is it going to be their responsibility prior to the insurance company paying?
Well, you have to take in consideration, the homeowners have to take in consideration that if there is something that's going to cause more damage, if they have a pipe breaking in their house and water spilling out, turn the water off, mitigate your own damages, take control. People always think I'm going to sit back and wait for my insurance company to come in with the flag.
Exactly.
They have to mitigate their own damages and think in the mindset that if I didn't have insurance, what would I be doing? Simultaneously calling your broker, filing your claim, but making sure that you are doing everything you possibly can to mitigate and minimize your claim. That will show the insurance companies that you actually really took control of your claim. That's what they want to see. They don't want to see that you have sat on your hands and waited for them, because they are going to be literally inundated with insurance claims. And so they are going to come out and make sure that it is a covered claim. If it's a covered claim, and talking about funds being sent, you see some of these homes that are completely devastated. They're on fire. Well, there's going to be funds rolling immediately for that, because that is going to be an undisputed situation. Now, if there is a crack in a very old home, they might take their time and get a structural engineer out to verify and validate that it was due to this earthquake, that the damages were a direct result from this earthquake. And you can see the roads from the television. The roads are buckled. There is going to be a lot of damage. Yeah. But again, I cannot emphasize enough, those old brick chimneys, stay away. Right. Go out to the street, take a look. Do you see, is it still going vertical. If it's still perfectly vertical, maybe it's maybe it's safe, but stay away from those
Don't
old
take the
brick
chance.
chimneys.
Don't take the
That's right.
chance.
All right, Leo.
Leo
One other-
Grover on the phone with us this morning. Leo, we really appreciate you spending some time and especially hearing it coming from your voice, and that is somebody who should know, somebody who has responded to multiple earthquakes in California and outside of the state as well, giving some good advice to people in terms of how to handle this, not just in the safe way, but in the best financial way, considering earthquake insurance and how expensive that is, and making sure that the benefits you have coming to you come to you in a timely manner.
And pointing out a good point as well that, we've heard from a lot of people this morning that have said that they didn't see any damage outside their home, but that doesn't mean that there is no damage. We want to show you these live pictures right now. We were talking about the cracks in the road. We were talking
Leo
about
was
the
just
roads
talking about that,
buckling, and this is an example of that you see right there on your screen, and it looks like Caltrans. I'm trying to look at the trucks to see what logo that is on the side, but it appears that Caltrans is surveying exactly what's the damage done. It must not be that bad because they are letting traffic go through, but still something to be concerned about, because this is probably something that is widespread, not just happening in this area, but probably popping up in other areas as well.
Yeah, and obviously, they're letting these cars through, as you mentioned, T, and it looks like they might have already fixed at least part of it. Otherwise, it doesn't look like there's a major spot where anybody's going to be, blowing a tire or anything like that. But you can imagine that these Caltrans crews are out across the entire Bay Area, considering, we talked to somebody from Pollock Pines, and that is quite a distance away from Vallejo, and they felt the shaking as well. So, we're looking at the damage in Vallejo and Napa, but, things like this, things like cracks in the road.
A lot of patchwork.
And we're also going to be having some aftershocks too. And so, as we've seen in earthquakes past, some of the road damage is made worse when these aftershocks happen, because they really can't get in there and do the work they need to before an aftershock shakes it up a little bit. So sometimes they'll wait. They'll give it a day or two and close some of these roadways, and then come back and handle it when things have calmed down just a little bit.
And we heard from a seismologist this morning who said 30 to 70 aftershocks could be felt in the next 7 days. And this video shows damage done in a store in Napa Valley. You see the damage right there on your screen. I mean, it looks like the place was literally just ransacked completely.
Yeah, and you go to the grocery store and you know exactly what this entails. And so when you have an earthquake like this, it's the cleanup process now that begins, and trying to figure out, we're talking about individual people having earthquake insurance and trying to get their adjuster out. But when you have a store like this, then they really have to not just look at the structural damage, but also the loss of products and things like that. So obviously it's way early right now. So we don't have any dollar estimates for what some of these major retailers, like I believe this was a Rayleigh's store.
Yes, and we've seen Walmart as well. So
we're dealing with the big stores. We're dealing with the big stores who are going to have some pretty big losses here, and the numbers probably coming out within the next day or so.
That's right, and we did get a chance to talk with David Oppenheimer a little bit earlier in this newscast. He's from the USGS, and he talked about the aftershocks that we will feel and some that have already happened in our area.
So when we have an earthquake of this size, we compute estimates of aftershock probabilities, and those probabilities are computed from what we call the generic model. It's just sort of like an average earthquake model for all of California. And it's not right. There is no such thing, but it's sort of in the middle of all aftershock decay behavior for earthquakes. So what we'll do is we'll record earthquakes, the aftershocks, for about 24 hours, and we'll watch how they're decaying. And that'll give us a better understanding of how this particular sequence is playing out. If it's got a lot of energetic aftershocks, the probabilities might go up. If it looks like it's dying out quickly, the probabilities will go down, but we don't have enough aftershocks at this time to actually update those statistics.
As a seismologist, though, Dave, is this something that is constantly monitored to see, if the faults are active, if something like this could happen?
We don't know how to predict earthquakes, and there are very few cases of foreshocks, small earthquakes that indicate that a big one is coming. And every day in California, there's probably upwards of 50 earthquakes. And trying to determine which one of those 50 earthquakes is a foreshock to a significant earthquake is a fool's game. We don't know how to do that.
All right, when something like this happens, obviously the governor is always going to weigh in and give us issue a statement. And as of this morning, he said this, quote, "My Office of Emergency Services has been on full activation since early this morning and is working closely with state and local agency managers, first responders, and transportation officials. All of that to respond to the impacts to residential and critical infrastructure. These public safety officials are doing all they can to help residents and those living in the affected areas should follow their guidance and their instruction." And obviously a lot more to come in the next 24 hours or so. But right now it is a process of surveying the damage, making sure that everybody is okay, getting the insurance adjusters out there and making sure that everything is all right where you live, and really just keeping the public safe.
And we've seen a lot of damage, especially in the Napa Valley area. Well, don't forget, for breaking news on this earthquake, you can follow us on Fox40.com, on Facebook, and of course on Twitter. You can also download the Fox 40 app to get breaking news alerts sent right to your smartphone for free. You can email us any damage that you've seen out there. You can send us pictures, you can send us videos to news@fox40.com. And of course, we are not done with our earthquake coverage. Stay with us after the break.